Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week we have a look at the 1979 film When a Stranger Calls. This is episode 409. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have seen it. So, warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, publisher at Castle Bridge Media, home of the Castle of Horror anthology. With me from Austin is Tony Salvaggio, lead singer and bassist of the band Deserts of Mars, and lead guitarist of the band Rise from Fire. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
Howdy. Also in Austin, Mr. Drew Edwards is the writer-creator of the long-running underground comic Halloween Man, which you can find at Global Comics. He is a Best Writer Ringo nominee again this year in 2023. Austin Chronicle Best of Austin Award winner and a member of the PEN America Fellowship. Say hello, Drew.
Have you checked on the children yet?
Sometimes the way the guy comes across, he reminded me of the land shark.
Land shark.
And finally, also in Denver, color commentary from Julia Guzman of Guzman Immigration of Denver. Say hello.
Hello, everyone.
Hello. And it's good to have you all back. It's good to hear your voices. So and maybe during endorsements, I want to hear what you did with our time off. We're stutter starting, but we're back this week. We're probably gonna take another week off as we take kids
to take
to
the kid to
stuff.
college. Yep.
And then we'll be back for real. So okay. When a Stranger Calls is a 1979 American psychological thriller film written and directed by Fred Walton, who had directed 2 years prior a film called The Sitter, which was a 23-minute short film that comprises the first 23 minutes of this movie. It just had a different cast, but it was literally shot for shot the same movie. Co-written by Steve Feke and starring Charles Durning, Carol Kane, Colleen Dewhurst, and Tony Beckley. Its plot follows Jill Johnson, a young woman terrorized by a psychopathic killer while babysitting, and then the killer's subsequent stalking of another woman, and then his return to torment Jill years later, and also the detective trying to track him down. All right. This film,
Detective in parentheses.
right. Whatever he is. No, he's a private detective.
He is, but he's we'll get into it. He's effectively operating as a hitman.
That is correct. Yes. Yeah. So all right. Let's get our opening thoughts. Let's go Julia, Drew, Tony, and then I'll go, and then we'll get into discussing the film. So Julia, I'm sure you had seen this movie before. It seems like a film that has been around. But what are your opening thoughts?
Well, first of all, we should back up and say that the reason we even watched it is because we were looking at a compilation of horror clips called Terror in the Aisles.
Yes.
And we decided that the compilation of horror clips itself didn't really work as a thing for us to review for the podcast, but it made us want to watch this movie. So we're like,
Yes.
let's watch this movie. So I remembered, I thought the movie was what's only the first 20 minutes. Like I thought the whole movie was that story. And it's because that the first 20 minutes was originally its own thing. It was a story, and then it was a short film. And then they decided to make it into a feature film because of the the success of Halloween, Halloween 2 or just Halloween. I can't remember which.
Halloween.
But
would have
Halloween,
been, yeah.
Halloween. And so they decided to stretch it into a full-length feature. So I'm gonna kind of gonna talk about the two things separately, because the first 20 minutes I think is just a masterpiece. I mean, it's just the way it's done. It's suspenseful. It's beautiful. It's like really, the shots are really cool. I just think it's really an amazing piece of work. And there's only a couple things about it that I don't 100% love. The rest of it is hit or miss, depending. Like I kind of feel like I didn't really love the whole middle story, even though I like the performances. But I do like that they bring Carol Kane back as a parent, as a mother later on, and that whole thing, that's super terrifying. It's a lot like the Halloween, Jamie Lee Curtis thing of coming back to her.
Mhm.
So kind of mixed feelings about it is where I come down.
Okay, excellent. That gives us, that tees up a lot. Drew, what are your thoughts?
So this is actually only the second time I've seen this movie, and kind of like Julia, the only real thing I remembered about it was the opening. Like I guess the first 10, 20 minutes of it with Carol Kane, which I guess is what most people remember about this movie.
Yeah.
This is kind of an interesting sort of in-between slasher movie. It's weird when you think about this in context of Halloween, because it's not quite like Halloween, and it's definitely not like the slashers that we get in the 80s, because the killer in this is, like on paper it reads a lot like Michael Myers, but he is not a character like Michael Myers. He is, Michael Myers is this sort of like elevated supernatural boogeyman, where this guy, he's a fairly realistic character, and by that I mean he is a pathetic lowlife.
Yeah.
And there's like, no one's gonna buy an action figure of this guy. I thought a lot about our conversation that we had about Slumber Party Massacre years ago while watching this, is that like the slasher subgenre of horror hadn't really become what we think of as like the fully codified slasher, and this is a good example of that. It's also interesting that almost all of the violence in this movie happens off screen.
Oh yeah,
and
that's true.
it has barely any body count to it. Like it's a very weird movie, and I mean that in terms of like the genre that we place it in.
We're going to tease some of that apart. I do want to return as one of our topics to how this fits into horror genre.
I do recommend that, if you haven't seen it and you are a horror fan, I do think that this is an interesting movie to go back and look at in terms of trends of horror and things of that nature.
Yeah, very good. Tony, what about you?
I think I'm with you that people, I don't think I've ever seen it all the way through. I think I've seen the first part, and then we have a middle part. If you can kind of this could almost be two separate movies, and it almost could be with only a few extra scene inserts and some different editing, could be a totally different movie.
Yeah,
because you have the kind of urban legend inside the house phone, which, by the way, I want to get into the phone thing later, because I had some thoughts and questions on just the logistics of all of that. Having grown up and like living in early times and then moving to an area that had like party lines and all of that, which not everybody even knew what that was, like the oldness of tech. But the middle part, you have basically a setup of what happens to how the mentally ill are treated in society. Now, this person should not have been released. They killed kids, right? But it tackles kind of similar issues and similar beats to even what we saw in the Joker, and partially why I didn't like the Joker as a
and this guy wasn't released; he escaped.
That's true. But this is 79, so it's only 2 years before Reagan like deinstitutionalizes mental health facilities, which led to a huge, like, a lot of people being homeless and not being taken care of and being treated. But a lot of that, like, I mean, yes, I'm not, by no means am I defending like a child killer person, but the middle part is a lot about this person who should not be there, who should be getting care, who's stalking people because he's out on the streets and stuff like that. And I thought that was it's an interesting switch, because what we have is like the kind of sets. You have the first part, which sets the tone for a lot of horror movies, and people always remember, like, I mean, still to this day, the call is coming from inside the house, even in an era of cell phones, right?
Yes.
Yeah, we say that every time. Every time when somebody calls from one part of the house to the other, we'll go, the calls coming from inside the house.
Exactly, right? And so you have that, and it's kind of been bookended, but the middle part is kind of different tonally, and how we deal with and like I said, mentally ill and homeless people in society and where they fit in. And it takes definitely a different flavor because we know that he's a murderer. But in general, like I said, it kind of is a different movie. And that's, I think, kind of fascinating to me, and it wasn't something I remembered or kind of thought about. And I don't think many people who see just the clips and the parts they remember probably remember that either. That's a different discourse altogether.
We should definitely discuss the tonal shift to the second part, which which I think you said it right. It feels like a totally different movie, and it doesn't even feel like a totally different movie that you signed up for. It's like, what
Right.
what am I watching? This It's not
Yeah.
offensive or anything like that. It just suddenly you're in a different kind of
Well, I mean,
1970s.
like I said, it could easily there it could be a movie about a disassociation from society.
Yes, sure.
With just like I said, you could easily turn that film, like some clever editing and some other little bits could turn it into that,
Yeah.
which I think, which is not, you can't necessarily say about a lot of other movies that have that same kind of killer in the house vibe. So
Yeah.
I think that's one thing that separates this movie from a lot of movies that came slightly before, but then definitely afterwards, when that became the trope.
So first, to start out with, we should. I want to talk about the beginning, because there's an interesting thing that I want to talk about the beginning, and really in terms of structure, because like we said, we watched Terror in the Isles, and we saw these scenes of the doe-eyed, creamy-skinned Carol Kane taking these photographs as this, fidgety teenager. I mean, she's whatever she is. She's in her mid-20s, but she's playing a teenager, and this person is calling. And there's this concept that Hollywood uses now. And if you really can't stand the concept of the Save the Cat organization, it's really just relabeling of the old Sid Field thing. So, but currently everybody uses Save the Cat nomenclature. So I'm going to use that. Save the Cat has a concept called the promise of the premise. The promise of the premise is that people are happier about the movie they chose to go see when the movie they sit down to watch looks like what they thought they were buying a ticket for, which sounds obvious, but it's not as obvious as you might think. So if the poster, for instance, and the best explanation is the poster, or what you saw in the trailer. So if you get the impression that something is a gonzo adventure with two guys who are teaming up, but you go to the movie and you find out that's only actually 10 minutes and the rest is about this guy arranging a funeral for his grandfather or something, you feel like you got ripped off, because the movie didn't live up to the promise of the premise. And the premise is whatever you told people it was when they bought a ticket. And that can be frustrating for a director if the thing got marketed wrong. But it's a fascinating problem in this movie, because as we all sat here and said, we all knew the first 20 minutes of this film. We would pay our ticket. In this case, we load up Peacock. We know what we're getting when we watch that. And I've never seen a movie ever just completely drop it after the first act. That's like, wait, I have Saving Private
I
Ryan. But
I
go ahead. Yeah.
think partly the reason why that happens is maybe, and this is just me guessing. I am by no means. I've never read a single thing about the making of this film, so I'm not proclaiming any insider knowledge here. But perhaps the screenwriters felt like that the scenario would be difficult to sustain for a feature length.
Well, yeah, I think that's what's happening is they've made a tight 23-minute, 22-minute, whatever it was,
Short
short,
film.
and they're like, let's definitely do that, and then we'll do a sequel of it inside the movie we're making.
Right.
You
So
could
it's
go ahead.
no. Well, you could what? You had.
Well, I've actually had some experience with this in my life, where I took a short story that I wrote that was about a scenario, in this case about home invasion, and the short story was like 3,000 words long, and I extended it to a book that was like 70,000 words long.
Yeah.
And the way that you do that is you have to just go ahead and say, all right, I can pull this apart and I can put a bunch of junk before we get to the scenario in the short story, and make the scenario in the short story actually like 5 times as long with a whole bunch of little steps along the way. The problem is they would have wound up, Drew, to your point, they probably would have been unhappy doing it, because they would have wound up killing the utter simplicity of the story. Because imagine
Yeah.
if, I know a little bit about the plot of the remake. Imagine if, like, there's a second house and she starts looking into, maybe there's a stalk, maybe he's somewhere, maybe the stalker is in the guest house, house. Let me go check it out and have a little scare over there. And then the phone's ringing and I come back and maybe I get locked out for a bit. You could invent all this crap that could make it last 90 minutes.
Right, or you could have made it where she does go and check the children, and the guy is there, and he tries to kill her, and she gets away, and then you continue into other houses or whatever. But I personally would have liked, if they're gonna leave the tight 20 minutes as they are, for them to then go 10 years later, and now she's with her kids, and the whole thing of like so many suspenseful and then you find out, just because obviously that's a kind of rip off of Halloween, that he escapes from the mental institution, but we find out, the audience, that he's escaped, and so everything about Carol Kane's life becomes suspenseful, because you're like, when's this guy going to turn back up again? And I think that just would have made it
Carol Kane basically disappears from the midsection of this movie. Like she's what they would
for
call
45 minutes or an hour, right?
Yeah.
I mean, she's gone.
What they would call on TV tropes a decoy protagonist, because she's not really the protagonist of the movie. Charles Durning's detective is. But we're not introduced to him until basically after the opening stinger is over. And
so funny you said that, the decoy protagonist, right? Because I'm thank you, because I was about to say, in modern terms, I'm confused as to who is the protagonist of this movie, because in the second half, it looks real close to becoming
the middle,
multi-Emmy award-winning actor Colleen Dewhurst, who suddenly
Well, no, that's not even the second half. That's just the second of the thirds.
It's actually the bulk of the film. It's like the middle,
right? And she's great. I love Tracy. I think she's great. And I wouldn't want her not to be in the movie. I just would have restructured it so that it was more about Carol Kane, and that maybe she's the neighbor, or maybe she's whatever. But because she's fantastic, her performance is really interesting. But I don't know. That's the thing.
In a different movie, Carol Kane would be that character,
Right.
Like she would be like in a movie that would be more consistent with kind of traditional screenplay rules, I guess.
Yeah.
Like she would have been kind of messed up, and she's working at this bar, and then this guy comes back, but it ends up like she doesn't recognize he's the homeless killer, and he's tracking her down. That would be a different movie.
That would be kind of like her having kids.
No. I think that's great. What I'm saying is, usually you don't have that character drop out. Instead, she would be
the next thing.
If it met expectations, she would be that character.
Right.
But we don't get that. We do get something interesting on both parts of it.
Yeah,
right?
How would you guys describe the premise, or basically the second movie in this movie, which is Charles Durning dealing with this escaped killer?
And Colleen Dewhurst.
Sorry, what did I say? Charles Durning and Colleen Dewhurst dealing with this killer.
You just said Charles Durning dealing with the killer, and I'm like, and also Colleen Dewhurst is part of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I mean, because to me it looks like a movie like Clute or whatever. I mean,
it's kind of a cat and mouse kind of thing.
Yeah.
Although, like, I don't, the killer that he is stalking is by no means a criminal. He's not Michael Myers, and he's certainly not Hannibal Lecter. Like, he's not a supervillain. He's just some guy.
And Charles Durning is not, like, I don't even know who's the best detective, but he's not Sherlock Holmes. He's just kind of, I don't know. He feels very clumsy to me, and this whole thing where he's not going to use a gun, he's going to use the lock needles instead. But then he ends up using that whole thing. Just, I don't know. Like, I was like, what's your big plan? Like, you're just kind of following this guy around.
I don't think he had a plan. I think his plan was find him and kill him.
And kill him with these lockpick tools.
I think that's sadism is what it's there, because I think the implication is that this case has haunted him, and when he is contacted by the kid's father, it kind of awakens this vengeful streak. I kind of like him as a character because he's like nobody's idea of a hero. Like he doesn't look like a hero. Like he's he's kind of
closer. Go ahead. Sorry. Yeah.
He's kind of indulging in police brutality to a degree. Like, it's he's very much an anti-hero
of a film of this era, by the way.
Well,
Go ahead, Tony.
I mean, there are tropes of this, and he kind of shares a similar vibe to our detective in Exorcist 3.
Yeah.
Like that kind of awkward, but there's a certain older cop character that he portrays really well. That's definitely part of it. And, look kind of like how I remember my grandfather looking for one of my grandfather on my mom's side for a long time. He's not especially fit, but he can take care of business kind of guy,
Well, yeah. I mean, shoot, that one time he runs through those doors, he pulls them off the hinges.
Yeah. Exactly. And, but there is that kind of older, been around the block cop character that he is. And, for all the times I'm talking about, hey, because it's more of a, you asked Jason, it's more of a psychological drama thriller in the middle part, because of just like, there's not much supernatural. He's not Jason. He's not Michael Myers. Really, in reality, he's a kind of a pathetic guy who's a killer, but we can't defend him because he killed children.
This is a 1970s style grimy city thriller.
What's interesting about the way he is portrayed, if I may back it up a second, when you see in the opening sequence, which is the scariest part of this movie to me, is he is like, you never see him, you only hear his voice.
The killer,
it's definitely easy to see how this probably influenced Scream a lot. But also, like, you don't ever see him the last you see his shadow, and he you hear him kind of warbling out like, "Here I come," and like in that moment he does feel like a movie monster. But once you actually see the guy, like, it feels so, it's again, it's sort of tonal whiplash, isn't it? Because
and then they even show him with the blood of the children on him when he's looking in the mirror having flashbacks about stuff, and that I thought was really weird. Like, I was like, I don't know if I like that, because I liked the way that they had left it without
well, I think the description of him, like they said that he like tore them apart with his bare hands. I think that was enough. You didn't necessarily have to see it, but this movie is so bloodless. Maybe they felt like they had to include.
Well, those are insert shots too. So
I kind of wonder if somebody was like, we need more gore in this, and they were like, oh well, we don't actually have anybody getting, because the two kids are really the only people that die in this movie, and that's kind of a strange choice for a movie that's trying to emulate Halloween.
I just want to spend a moment on Charles Durning, who is such a fantastic dude, very interesting. He looks so tired this whole movie. I love his physicality. Like, if you grew, think about it, it's like 1979. So if you came up during the 50s where men looked like James Arness, in these leads, he cuts such a different figure. I mean, physically as well as just symbolically. But Durning himself is a fascinating cat. I mean, I was just reading, he landed at D-Day, where he was wounded in the leg with machine gun, these big machine gun bullets tore apart his leg. He recuperated. 6 months later, he was at the Battle of the Bulge, and he was stabbed 8 times in hand-to-hand bayonet combat, but killed his attacker with a rock, earning him his second Purple Heart.
Wow.
Then, after recuperating from that, went to Germany in March of 1945, where he was shot in the chest, and then he came home. And so, where he became a dance instructor, and then became the Charles Durning that we know. But it's so strange to me to look at this guy and think, Jesus, this guy's been stabbed 7 times, shot in the chest, had his leg torn up, and you can almost imagine that as the background for the detective character.
Yeah,
that we're looking
like,
at
hey,
here.
channel that into your detective I mean, that's amazing. Wow.
Most of us couldn't get shot in the chest once. I mean, you know,
Yeah, I mean,
that's just I don't know
all
what
of
to do with
that.
guys like
So
that.
what you're
That's
saying is
amazing.
that you believe that he would stab a guy with a lockpick?
Yes,
I
absolutely.
mean, again, if you want somebody to take care of business,
Yes.
he is the one.
There's
I
another
do want
interesting
to go
thing about
back
him. Oh, go ahead, please.
one just briefly to go back, and I feel bad because I think this is the maybe even better topic. But one thing about when we're talking about the differences in tone between the killer
Mhm.
is they do kind of make a weird segue though, where he does all they describe all the stuff, and then they also go like, yeah, but he's just some guy who came over here recently, like to kind of just write that off. Like
Yes.
it definitely like tamps that down, and so your expectations going into the psychological thriller part are kind of different. That it's an odd. They don't make him out to be like he was a terror, all of his eyes, dead, blah blah blah. They're like, hey, yeah, it's some guy came over here.
I
I
think
don't know.
it's to
Not many
kill
people
your
know him.
expectations.
Exactly.
It's to
That's what I'm.
make you like Durning is, where you're like, really, I don't really give a shit. I don't think he's magic.
Right.
It's
Well, this is a movie that, outside of the opening sequence,
yeah,
sort of it takes place in reality to me.
right.
Like this like the opening sequence is, because it's rooted in an urban legend, like it feels more mythic,
Yes.
whereas this, everything that comes after it is, I'm a detective, I've been paid to hunt this guy down, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it very methodically. And you have, as Tony pointed out, a mentally ill guy that just ends up on the street because he is coming off his meds. He
Yep.
doesn't know what's going on, and he just kind of gets obsessed with this barfly.
Yeah.
So it's not, like, out of all the dozens of horror movies that we've watched, this is the one that I feel like comes close, dozens, hundreds, that comes the close. Like, this could be something that could happen. Like, it's not, a spooky
Right.
campfire story. It's not, this guy is just, he's a lowlife. And
It's so interesting that that's the choice they make, right? Because like we talked about, like you could have stayed mythic, you could have stayed campfire tale, and instead, I think this guy, the director, wants to tell this story. Like, we've talked about how the suffering of people on the street was something that was much more present in films in the 70s and 80s than in the ensuing 40 years. Like the fog, right, deals with all of this stuff about economics that doesn't appear in the remake of the fog. And this movie has the guy staying in a mission, and I don't remember the last time I saw somebody hanging out among homeless people and
I
making
mean,
homeless people into characters.
heck, the Prince of Darkness, the the army of evil is just whoever was possessed as a homeless person.
Yes, yeah,
Led by Alice Cooper.
that's
I mean,
that's
that's
right.
like that was a whole thing, and I agree. And I think I think there is some channeling, like I said, not to bring too much. I think without bringing up the politics of the time. I mean, it was a big deal.
Yeah,
Turning out the way that our mental institutions were handled in the Reagan era directly led to a lot of this stuff. It's more complicated. I mean, that's a very
no, I'm
simplistic
I'm with
view.
you.
But it is something that happened in our history, and it became, a lot of cities, a lot of places had to deal with that in a different way.
Yeah,
There's a lot. I mean, there's books upon books and movies upon movies about, homeless crisis and mental illness and stuff like that. But I mean, that I think that became part of the psyche because it did start to affect, especially when you had horror movies in big cities, which became, that became part of the oh no, it's dangerous to go here or here.
yes, the notion of the city as a place that's dangerous to go to. You think about stuff like Dirty Harry, which was also in the 70s, right? And
Right.
and like if you remember the Zodiac killer in that movie, is that what he was called? Scorpio killer.
Right.
Whatever.
But yeah,
Anyway, the
yeah.
Scorpio killer in that is a guy that Harry doesn't have the tools to deal with because the law has become, in the mind of that movie, too, what is it, too
Soft on
coddling,
crime.
Yeah, too
Yeah.
soft on
Yeah.
crime. But clearly what you're watching at least is the movies grappling with these problems and trying to go, how are we supposed to think of it? Are we supposed to think of it with compassion? Are we supposed to think of it as I'm fed up and
Yeah,
I'm about to go kill some people? But at
it
least they're
is.
asking the questions.
Yeah, I think
Right.
it's pretty even-handed as far as going, okay, so this guy, we know he's killed children, but when he's in the bar, he's just a creeper, and so he needs, like, he doesn't have,
Right.
he needs to back off. So Jason was like, man, it really does suck to be a woman at a bar, basically, like, because yeah, that's still how it is. Like, people just bug
Oh
you and
yeah. I
they
mean,
won't leave you
it's
alone. And it's like we're talking about, like, they're the nice guy. Like, why don't women, when you just, no, she wants to be left alone, she should be able to sit there at the bar and say no thanks, and then you go away and stop bugging her. But at the same time, you're also like, well, this guy is just kind of, he's socially awkward, he might be on the spectrum, who knows, like, he's cut, so you feel bad for him, but you also know that he does need to respect her boundaries. He
Well, we
doesn't
we
deserve to
also
get the
know
shit beat out of him
something.
based on what we
We
know about him in that bar. Not the killing of the children, of course. Go ahead.
we also know something that none of the other characters in
Right.
that bar know, that he is homicidal,
Yeah.
Sure.
right.
and
But if you
that
only
creates
know, yeah, if you only know what they know, it's difficult to know what's the right thing to do, because he does need to leave her alone, but that particular person, just like, again, based on just what we've seen in the bar, doesn't deserve to get the shit beat out of him by this guy.
Well, I think the
Right.
fact also that he does get the shit beat out of him, going back to the sort of reality of this, like, if you look at the way horror movie villains were portrayed going forward, like, Hannibal Lecter would never get the shit beat out of him in a dive bar. Like
Right.
Freddy Krueger would never get the shit beat out of him in a dive bar. Like, they would always have the upper hand.
Yeah.
Um, this guy, I mean, even the way we just saw what we in one of the Scream movies, where they have Ghostface go into that bodega, like, and Ghostface
Mhm.
is supposed to be a regular person under the costume, but he still Batman dodges out of the ways of bullets
Yeah, that's
and,
true. I didn't
like,
think about that.
completely
You're right.
destroys everything in his path. Like, this guy, he's this gaunt, mentally disturbed guy who's not fully in control of his faculties. And yes, he's dangerous, but he's also somebody that's you can physically overpower
Yeah.
if you want. And the reality of that is really interesting. And I do think some of it is, yeah, that maybe that's the story the filmmaker wanted to tell. But I also just don't think that, I think if this movie was made a couple of years later,
Mm.
they would have first of all, they would have put him in a mask or something.
Well,
Yeah.
and the guy was actually terminally ill, so that's why he looks the way he does.
Really?
Yeah.
But
Oh, geez.
Seriously?
yeah, but the director was really good friends with him, so he didn't want to recast him, even though he didn't really look like
That's
Well,
him.
really
I think
interesting.
I think it really works,
Yeah, I think so
because,
too.
like, he's, I that's sad, but it does, especially that scene where you see him, like, without his, like, clothes on and everything, and you see how, like, thin he is. Like, it's
Yeah.
easy to believe that he's somebody that's been locked up in an institution, living
Mhm.
off of, toast and jello for,
Yeah.
Tony
7
Beckley
years.
is his name. But yeah, it also helps you do, like, again, feel compassion for him, even though he's, a horrible murderer. When you see him there in the bathroom of the rescue mission, just like on the floor, you feel like this is a human being who is suffering, and how can, what can society do to help somebody like this to
Well,
not hurt
you
other people?
wonder how much he understands about, like, it's
Yeah.
like in the opening sequence, he might as well be a ghost or a monster. Like, he says stuff like, "Oh,
Right.
I want to bathe in your blood," and
Mm-hmm.
stuff
Yeah.
like that. And but then, like, in the later scenes, you kind of start to speculate, does he even understand, what his actions are like? Like, does he have a understanding of what right and wrong is? And that's a really interesting choice, but it's also really creepy because it makes you think about the people you see every day. Like, you don't know if you're walking next to a maniac or not.
Well, and it also means that you have to take on the moral culpability of, if you're going to kill this guy because you don't want him to kill, Colleen Dewhurst or Carol Kane or more kids or whatever, you're going to take on the moral problem of, you're going to kill somebody who maybe is who has problems and maybe needs to be protected by society, who has innocence about him, and also, but you're going to decide policy wise that you're going to shoot him. And that's a more complicated thing than dealing with Michael Myers who turns into a monster and wears a shape, and
Yeah.
so forth.
Also, a lot of when you're talking about kind of Dirty Harry and things adjacent to that, it's kind of different. But there's a lot of that bravado of, and it's carried on in kind of unhealthy ways, but also some, probably some revenge films that I'm okay with, where the idea is, yeah, it's all well and good to be lenient on on people until that it kills somebody close to you.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this like, well, that's good if you want to be this bleeding heart, but then what if they kill somebody close to you? And that is a fear, but also it's played up usually in a way that's unhealthy. In a, how do we really want a lot of street justice? Sometimes it seems frustrating that we do, that we, that yes, in fact we do, because things are broken. But then also, like, how far does that go? And there's a lot of movies that deal with that as well.
And we actually, by the way, have rules for that. I mean, in other words, most of us don't do street justice, and the answer is because you don't want to spend the rest of your life in prison. So people will say, well, how would you feel if it was your loved one? And the answer is, well, I would want to kill that guy, and that's why people don't allow me on a jury, right? We have policies to deal with these very natural inclinations.
But it does, again, it goes to a tonal shift here where it's I mean, we are dealing with almost two movies in that way.
Yes.
Right?
Well, like, you literally have the father of the children.
That's
like,
true.
It's not stated that he's hiring him to take out a hit, but they sort of say it without not.
Yes.
Yeah,
saying
exactly.
Yeah, like, he's like, this should never happen again, and he you know what that means.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and then I love the cop being like, "Oh, okay, just do a good job when you kill
Don't
this
get caught.
Don't get caught. Don't get it back to me.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, the guy ripped apart children. You can't defend
Nobody's
that.
gonna, exactly.
But and I think the fact we're discussing it, that is kind of one of the more interesting things about this. It's not just it could have easily just been a short film, or even a film that's just the beginning and the end parts.
Yes.
Right. He comes back to terrorize his victim in her house again. Like, you could have done that split, but the fact that this movie does decide to do something different that people often, I'd forgotten about it. Is what is kind of fascinating about it, I think.
I had no idea.
I do wonder, though, how much of that was intentional and how much of that is that, the rules of what a slasher movie was just weren't cemented yet. Like, because I really do feel like if this movie had been made in, like, if it was coming out in 1981 instead of 1979, I think that this movie would have been a lot different.
Well, I want to say, so you're totally right about slashers, and I'm interested in what if you were the guy taking this assignment, then what would you have done in '83 to make it more in keeping with that? But it's not even playing according to the rules of Hollywood movies. This is just super weird, like if Durning, because like you said, it may be that those rules are not as cemented in 1979 as they are in 2023. That's a super possibility. That 43 years is a long time, but today you would never ever do this. Like, introduce a whole nother main character.
Well, he also wouldn't be. He also wouldn't be like a stocky middle-aged guy. Like if they did this movie in.
Well, they did it in 2006, and I don't remember what that's like. So we're gonna find out. In two episodes, we're gonna see 2 or 3, depending on if we have another film going there. But
I mean, like I said before, you do have the latest the Joker movie where he does in fact start stalking a woman, and it actually comes to her house. And
That's
you
right.
do have a guy who's breaking down because of the system, and the system is not kind to him, and that kind of
Talk
thing.
to me about your
And so
Joker connection, Tony. You were thinking about
well,
this
it
a
just
lot,
feel
like
like
thinking
it
of
just
this
feels
movie.
like
Yeah,
it feels very similar. It feels like those filmmakers may have watched this part, which again is a different movie. I only this time he, our the villain in this that does murders beforehand, whereas the Joker is more of a misled. But it also still disturbs me that some people still go, man, sometimes the Joker's right. And you're like, no, not please talk to other people.
yeah, exactly. I have no
Please
idea what the hell.
get some like let's talk this out about why that's not like I get it, like, because in that movie he's also, but again, he's a person who is let down by the system, and
Yeah.
this person escapes. But it's, if you didn't have the beginning 20 minutes, it would be really similar, because we're introduced as just the stocky guy who is dealing with moment after moment of being a homeless person with mental illness,
Hmm.
right? And how he approaches the world. And so as I was watching this, I was like, oh, well, it's kind
Yeah.
of feels like some of the beats even feel, because we get a different thing because there's a detective after him, but there's also law enforcement kind of trying to figure things out in that movie as well. And I just wonder, like, that was not a movie I thought about influencing until I saw this again, like all the kind of
It
recently
is a
remembering.
really interesting way to put it, because when you walk into the Joker, that because because it was on the poster, that the movie's going to be about the Joker, so you're following him. Whereas
Right.
you walk
It's
into this movie, When a Stranger Calls, I think somebody sitting in the theater in 1979 is very likely to be going, "What am I doing? Like, what? Why are we following him around? He's not the main character." It.
right.
I also think that it's. I mean, I want to. I mean, sometimes it's interesting to see, but I think it's a mistake. I mean, I think the way this movie is written is not the way that they should have done it. Maybe it's not fair, like, to say,
Well,
"Oh,
I
I'm
think you
gonna."
could have had
Well,
the stuff like Julia was saying. I think you could have had that stuff if you had interspersed it more with the Carol Kane character. I
Yes.
think I
mhm.
think that all this sort of like cat and mouse kind of, killer detective
Yeah, that's true.
stuff.
Julia figured out, like, make Colleen Dewhurst somehow in Carol Kane's orbit so that they
Yeah,
are
she could, like I
connected.
said, she could be the neighbor who the guy goes and hides in her house or whatever.
Neighbor,
Yeah.
mentor, professor. We don't know what Colleen Dewhurst's character even does for a living. She wears nice heels, right? And she has pantsuits. So, I don't know what she does, but she could be a professor that's, because it's only been 7 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we know Carol Kane is older because her hair is longer.
Right, but she's only 7 years older. That's the
Oh yeah.
crazy thing. Like she's gone from a teenager 18-year-old to, I guess, 25-year-olds or something like that,
Although
or
she feels almost like she's pushing 30, like she's
yes,
she's pretty set up in her life.
she's got a sweet house. Yes. No,
I
she's
even
amazing.
was trying to do the math if those kids, like, if they were the right, like what age are they supposed to be?
No, I have no explanation for that at all. Yeah. We should talk for a moment
Uh,
about Carol Kane, because I'm so accustomed to Carol Kane being, her character on Taxi and on Star Trek, that it's strange to me to hear her just give a normal performance as just a regular
Well, and it's like you said,
American.
she looks so young here. Like
Yes.
She's so
it's
pretty.
not, yeah, it's not that far off from Taxi, but like she looks so much more ingenue like
Yes.
in this.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, she's 27, 26 or 27 when she's making this movie. And
Well, is she so I said the thing about how they made the first part as a short film. Did they make this first 20 minutes as the short film, or did they redo the first 20
they
minutes?
redid the
yeah.
1977 short with a different cast.
Okay, because I
Right.
was gonna say it'd be interesting if it was Carol Kane both times, but
Mm-mm.
like a couple years apart.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And Taxi, by the way, she joined that in 1981, so just 2 years later.
Well, also, I've seen Kimmy Schmidt enough that I just think of her. That's, which is kind of almost an offshoot of her role in Scrooged.
Huh.
The flavor of her
I haven't
she
seen that.
usually plays like quirky characters. And this character is rather more like, yes, she does kind of have her bouts of like post-traumatic stress, but for the most part, she's a normal person. And that is also interesting to
very,
see Carol
very
Kane
super
play.
normal. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Jason, if you haven't watched Kimmy Schmidt, you should. It's really good.
But
her character in that is just, she goes deep into bizarre and quirky, and it's done really well. But yeah, like it was kind of cool to see her in this role. You know, especially and she does really well, like the whole restaurant scene. You know, terrifying.
Yes.
Like, what do you do when you're in that situation? And
oh my God, yes,
things have gone. You know, hey, your husband's getting a promotion. We're having this really nice dinner. And then, you know, to bring back that trauma, all of that stuff, like that is, I mean, it's done really, really well.
Well, also like in the opening scene, how and at least initially the cops, like they're not having it with her. Like they're kind of being dismissive, at least initially.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you're a hysterical woman, and you know, clearly there isn't somebody in the house with you.
Yeah, I mean it goes with the like, okay, yeah, the teen babysitter, we have other stuff to deal with, like how, come on, you know, these aren't the Halloween, these aren't cops who would be in Haddonfield in Halloween 2, right? They're in kind of normal, okay, sure, I mean, I guess if things get worse, let us know.
Yes.
Which you know, maybe that's not what we expect, but it is the reality of how things get reported and how things get escalated.
Oh, and absolutely. Frankly, I guess in a lot of instances they would be right. So like you know, serial killer like breaking into somebody's house secretly and murdering the kids upstairs, that's not a regular occurrence. So
also, you know, it's kind of funny to me, and I've mentioned this before, but the way that they explain it, so there's kind of two ways, because I was like, phones of that era, how could you do it? There's two ways. You could call using a callback number. There's like a code you could put in that would call back and ring, but then you would hear the other phone ring. You would hear all the phones in the house. In this case, they say it was a phone line that they forgot, which by the way, I don't know what kind of upper class BS is going on, because one of the reasons we didn't have an extra phone line when I was growing up, or like to not tie up the phone lines, or why you didn't have an extra phone line when you got a modem that you had to go, was because it was damn expensive.
Right.
Yes.
If you were middle class, like there was like that, you know how much that's going to cost us per month? You can't have an extra phone line. So just to forget having a phone line is one of those things that's
well, like, also, how did he figure that out? Because he had to not only figure out that there was a phone line, but he then had to probably plug in a phone.
Well, and
probably
it says
plug in a phone,
they make note of the fact that in IMDb that it would have taken a lot longer than a minute to trace a call back then. You know, like that was not a thing. It was going to take way. But the other practical thing, the other just logistical thing is, if you're going to murder 2 children by hand, why somebody's going to hear it, because the children are never in the house by themselves, you know. So that would be like at least one of the children would have woken up and start screaming.
Well, okay. So, when did he murder the kids? Because
it's unknown. It's unknown whether he did it while the parents were there or while she's there, because either way, they said it was a few hours. So probably
they mentioned it was like 4 hours.
Yeah, so like, maybe when the parents were there, because he calls almost immediately, right?
And honestly, she's kind of a shitty babysitter for not going up there and checking immediately.
It's true, but if she had, she'd super be dead, because obviously he was lying in wait for her.
There's a couple of instances of people being kind of shitty, like in this movie, because like the detective, you know, he kind of gets that other homeless guy to be his informant. At no point does he say, hey, be careful around this guy, he's a homicidal maniac.
Yeah,
right. No, he never says that. But the other thing, though, about I was thinking about is how frustrated he must have been that she never did come up to check the children, because he's literally just probably sitting on the floor waiting to pounce on her when she comes up, and he's made a decision. He is not going to go to her. She has to come to him.
Yeah, that's the game that he's set up.
Hours and hours and hours. So he's just like, oh my God, when is she going to come up?
she even almost walks up at one point and then stops. So he must have been
Well,
like,
no, he calls
"Damn
her
it!"
at that moment. She
Oh
starts
yeah,
to
you're
walk
right.
up and he calls her. It's like, oh, if he had noticed that she was walking up, maybe he would. And then when she's finally leaving is when he starts to come down. When she finally goes to, then I did not like. I thought it was super hokey the effect of her opening the door and he's coming down the stairs, and then you see Charles Durning in a weird like photo kind of. That was
That was
strange.
strange, right? I that was a deliberate choice. I don't know what it
It was
means.
well, it was meant to be to make you think that he's at the door, but then oh no, actually that's later, and maybe she's dead. Oh no, she's not dead. Like it's just to throw you off, I think. But it was a weird
Well, I
choice.
will
Like,
tell you, it's a deliberate choice used twice because I
yeah.
watched the 1977 one and it literally does the same thing of
Mm,
the weird effect of a printed out photograph that
yeah.
you're looking at. I mean, it may have something maybe it's meant
It's
to
it's
make you think
it's
of archival footage or something.
it's
Yes.
the shift in tone happening on
Hmm.
screen.
Yes, right.
It's
It sure
weird.
does. At that moment, it's like, hey, fellas, meet your new protagonist for the next,
Hmm.
45
Rest of
minutes
the
to an
movie.
hour.
Yeah.
I want to talk also about something that Catherine Coldiron has mentioned many times, so I can't pretend that I made this observation first. But she's noticed how so many people in 1970s movies have sort of she says real faces, that's fine. But like I would say just people who look like hammered shit a lot. Like, we already talked about how the killer Tony Beckley looks ill. Charles Durning is doughy and tired looking, and Colleen Dewhurst is giving a very sort of lived in, blousy, tired performance. And I keep thinking about like that remake of The Fog and how performances like this just don't happen anymore. A big budget movie that comes out in the theater, everybody's gonna be perfect looking. Everybody's gonna have
Well, that's
zero
a
body fat and everything.
That's a huge switch to Hollywood because, one thing's, we watch a lot of movies on different BBC channels or, watching Fantastic Fest movies where, they come from all over the world. And yes, there are movies where everybody's pretty, everybody's beautiful and has a certain look. But I think there's an idea that this is what our Q factor audience, this is what our audience wants, and
Yeah,
we've honed this because this is what we've been told that this is what we want. When part of the coolness of a lot of movies, part of what's drawn me to a lot of foreign movies is you have actors and actresses who give that really believable kind of look where it's not, and it's why Hollywood is defined by other countries as what is Hollywood. Oh, it's
yeah.
this one aspect. It's nice, and
Beautiful people
it's
doing
weird.
impossible things.
Yeah, and it's weird too to kind of, it almost feels reductionist in some ways to kind of go like, oh, look, that person looks real. Like what you're saying is they're not perfect looking.
They're
How does
not
that
perfect
make them
looking.
feel? And you're like, well, you don't want to get too far into that, but it's nice when an
I'm not uncomfortable
actor or
saying that Charles Durning does not look like a Hollywood leading man in this
yeah.
movie because he definitely does not, and they've dressed him on
But he
purpose.
but he does look like he can kick your ass.
Oh
Yes,
no, he like
Like
yeah,
it's just like we
he's
could
got the
call
gravity
him.
of the guy who got stabbed and shot.
Yeah,
yeah,
like
There's no doubt about that.
you mentioned George C. Scott
yeah,
earlier, and I think that's like a good comparison because it's like
Yeah.
somebody that isn't built like Sylvester Stallone or Arnold or your typical action hero, but you wouldn't want to get in a fight with them. Like they
right.
absolutely look like they could fold you, and like I believe that about this guy.
Yeah,
And
man. He
um
carries that.
yeah, so like I think that there is merit to like both kinds of casting, and this is going to seem far afield at first, but
No, I like
bear
this
bear
topic. This
with
is an
bear with
interesting
me.
topic. Yeah, go ahead.
When my friends and I saw the Barbie movie last weekend, we talked about how, at least initially, Amy Schumer was going to be the lead in that. And look, I like Amy Schumer. I actually think she's an attractive woman, but she doesn't look like a Barbie doll, whereas
Right.
Margot Robbie does. So she was the better casting of the two.
No, you're right.
And
That makes sense.
and I think for this movie, having people who look a little, or look, are allowing themselves to look, because like we makeup and hair and clothing can do a lot too.
Absolutely,
But
yeah.
and Carol Kane looks very pretty in this movie, so
No, it's almost like when the movie slams back to the world of Carol Kane, you re-enter a sort of more contemporary Hollywood, glamour set, because she's really beautiful, and they've made her more beautiful.
Well, and
With
it's also like she's living sort of an upper middle class.
yeah, for sure.
It's like
Yeah.
she's got a very nice house, she's got a successful husband. Whereas like we've just spent 45 minutes in like the mean streets,
Right.
like, and that
And
probably was a deliberate choice. I mean, I don't know.
when you say it that way, it begins to mean something. I'm not sure what,
Yeah.
but it has a
Well, I
certain
think
thematic clarity.
what this does that you definitely see continued on in other horror movies of this time period is the idea of something interrupting our blissful suburban
Yes.
existence, like the idea of horror happening in if you think back to like Universal and Hammer, the idea of like this sort of middle European fantasy world where all these things are
Yes.
happening, what you started to see happening in the 70s and 80s is we weren't interested in that anymore. Horror was happening in our backyard, and in most, a lot of cases it was, let's transplant the monster to suburbia. You see that in Salem's Lot, Gremlins.
Yes.
Certainly Nightmare on Elm Street. This isn't interested in that. This is reality. It's just
If you think about this period of time, the what we were saying about people looking like real people, or sort of reflecting reality, that's actually just very peculiar to this like period. This like, I guess starting in the late 60s and moving to the first half of the 80s. That's about it. Because if you go back to like, the studio era, it's all super glamorous, and if you go to today, people can say that it's over, that Hollywood films are overly beautiful, and overly everything's too perfect. So it was just
I
this
think
particular era. Yeah.
even with horror movies, you started to see that change, because what happened is a lot of the lower budget movies, they would hire people who weren't necessarily movie stars, but they were bankable TV stars. So you started to have, even if it was a lower budget movie, you would have these sort of lantern jawed guys and modelly looking women, and and that's fine. Like I'm not saying, I do think that it just depends on what you're trying to do. If you're trying to, although like I feel like when you're trying to have this a sort of like tough guy character, I do always tend to prefer, even in the 80s, like you would occasionally have like the Tom Atkins type or something. Like you would, like there's something just a little bit more believable about that than having somebody that looks like I don't know, like a guy from a WB TV show.
Yeah. The example I always think of, by the way, is the remaking of Kolchak. And I can't remember who they recast Kolchak as, but he looked nothing like Darren McGavin. He didn't have that sort of hammered shut look that Darren McGavin had. I think they went with somebody beautiful. I just can't remember what his name was. Nothing against beautiful guys,
Yeah, Tom Cruise is Reacher.
Right. That's true. Reacher's supposed to have a broken nose and and look like a condom full of walnuts, is the way that the writer has described what Reacher would look like in real life. And people describe Tom Cruise as many things, but that's
Definitely
not one
of them.
All right. So,
well, I mean, also Wolverine's supposed to be a stocky, hairy guy, and he's Hugh Jackman.
Right. No, exactly. Yeah. This is just what we do with Hollywood. And I love all those things, by the way. I love Tom Cruise as Reacher. I love, Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. Like, I'm here for it. I'm a big fan. So, but it is remarkable.
When you're talking about the grittiness too, and kind of the look and feel, even though it's way grittier than even this movie. But I just recently watched The Exterminator from 1980, which was I think Troma distributed it. But that movie gets super. It's in the definitely the revenge. The streets again. The streets are mean and evil, and
all I
we
remember is
have a
the
guy
poster with the motorcycle helmet
and the like flamethrower. Yeah.
Yeah, but I
Boy,
never saw it.
that and that film is that's some grit. But it kind of has that, like, everybody in it has that gritty feel, and also, I mean, it is a grim movie. In my opinion, worth watching, but buyer beware on it doesn't it's also they have a whole Vietnam scene that is like it must have been a huge chunk of the budget, but it had that the grim and grittiness of the city and the feel of it kind of fit in exactly what you're talking about. It's like 1980, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I mean, that's the
There's
era
a lot of that,
of
like
grim, gritty, grimy, slimy, very moist films about men and women killing people in revenge. And we could watch a week. I mean, we could definitely do a retrospective of revenge thrillers, but boy, they can get you
but
down.
I mean, I think again, like Exterminator was one I hadn't. I think I'd seen the box art. Definitely, it's a very memorable poster.
Yeah.
Kudos to whoever set that up, because it's like,
Boy, it
whoa.
is. That one was in every VHS place.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Got well distributed. I think I'd seen parts of it, but I just recently saw the whole thing. But as I was watching, the section we keep coming back to, like, I really felt like, oh, okay, this is the era I'm in. Only a year later this comes out.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. So anyway, the before we get to to final thoughts, is there anything else that we should touch on that we haven't brought up? Well, one thing that I will mention is the score is really cool. Like, the score is talking to you all the time, and it never feels obtrusive. It always feels like it's very in control of the mood. This is Dana Kaproff, and he did a lot of films, including both of the When a Stranger Calls movies and Wes Craven's Chiller. So a lot of horror. So cool. Why don't we get final thoughts, and then we will be back. We're going to be talking about more of these films because our next in this series, we're going to do When a Stranger Calls Back, which is going to return to these characters. And I really want us to try to help solve the problem for these guys. Is like, they're faced with this movie, they have to do a sequel to it. What did they do? Did they wind up doing what we would have recommended, or something completely different?
Yeah, because given that, spoiler alert, this killer's shot at the end of this movie, so
yes,
probably he's not coming back unless he's supernatural like the other ones.
Yeah, so I and if anybody knows, don't spoil it right now, because I want to watch it and I don't remember what happens. I know I've seen it, but I just literally cannot remember. So, all right. Cool. Let's get our final thoughts. Julia, have you enjoyed discussing When a Stranger Calls and being
Oh
back?
yeah, always. No, it's been really fun. Yeah, I think we definitely are giving this film a lot of respect. It's just there's parts of it. Structurally it's weird, and like you said, it's before Save the Cat, so I think we're kind of not, I wouldn't say ruined, but we're conditioned to believe that movies should be structured that way, and so it's a little bit jarring when it's not. But for me, the first movie, the 20-minute movie at the beginning is just masterful, and then the rest of it is a decent fun time. That's pretty much all I have to say about that.
Drew, what about you?
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting flick. I don't know if I will end up in my regular rotation, but I'm definitely glad that I watched it. And I think it's if you're trying to sort of round out your horror education, I think it's a good movie to watch in that respect, because I think it's a transitional movie, and a lot of times those are really interesting to me. And it's interesting that they come into this off of our conversation on Scream and then Peeping Tom. So I think
Mhm.
there's been a lot of connective tissue between these various
That's
films that we've been
absolutely true.
watching.
Yeah.
So yeah, interesting view. I one I guess other final thought. I was very surprised that the husband survived the entire movie. I thought he was
Yeah,
toast.
I did too. That was an interesting choice. It could have gone either way, definitely.
Yeah.
That's a good bit of suspense. So we'll yeah, if you haven't watched this movie, I guess let's not spoil how that suspense works. Although we do know, well, yeah, spoilers, he survives, but nevertheless, let's what happens is fascinating. Thank you, Drew. Tony, what about you?
Yeah, I also think the first part is there's a reason why most people remember it and why it sets the tone for the trope. And I think I don't want to go. I don't want people to take it as going too hard on the difference in tone. It's just an interesting to me. It's just an interesting part of this movie because of how it's remembered. Like I think as I watched it again or watched all of it because I'd only seen pieces. I just found that to be fascinating. It also, by the way, does highlight, and there's other movies that do it well, but the danger of being a single woman, especially in this case in the city, as it is writ large in capital letters, the city or the
Yeah,
cities, which we're supposed to think of as every city is worse than
cesspools.
Mos
Yes.
Eisley in the as far as scum and villainy on every corner. That there's no it's every city is just 70s to early 80s Times Square across the whole city, as we
Yeah.
are to believe in a lot of movies. Like there is no break from the direct seediness of a New York Gotham, right?
Yeah.
But it does highlight that the way it's shot and the suspense built up does really highlight that, and it's scary every time. Being an adult watching these movies is a different experience than
Yeah.
if I'd watched this as a teenager. I think, and knowing the exact danger of all of that, talking to friends and loved ones and everything. And I do also think that once we go back to I agree with you. I'm not going to spoil it, but I think when it gets back to Carol Kane's character, we do set that up like it's a good kind of bookend to the detective thriller parts.
Yeah.
And how that comes back around, actually it does pay off.
Yeah. That's true.
But it's an interesting movie in the fact of the tonal shifts, right?
Yeah.
But I think it does a lot of things really effectively. Just may not be the movie that people expect when you only see those clips. But how amazing is it? And it's partially based. I was just kind of reading up on it because, especially when I looked up wait a second, how would you call from inside the house again? Like, because I remember, like I said, I living in a small town that you couldn't even get pulse dialing in the tiny town I lived in when I was really young. Like
They
I
should have
couldn't even
just
get pulse
left.
dialing
Yeah.
until that, like, so we had party lines, which was you
Yeah.
shared
Yeah.
several phones, and luckily eventually we had a party line that was just us.
But they should have just left that line out about the fact that, oh, it's just a line that they forgot about. Who cares? Who cares how he did it? It's
Right,
creepy as
but
hell.
Yeah.
the thing is when I was looking that up because I was trying to remember, there is an actual kind of based off a true story killing, murders that happened that this kind of was influenced by, and that was kind of horrifying. And but to take that and turn that into its own urban legend, turn that into a movie that then is repeated, and again, Scream definitely takes that, multiple movies. I mean, there's all kinds of they're in the house tropes that stem from this. Regardless of how this movie is received, it definitely set the tone and was suspenseful enough to have it, copycats across, or depending on art, the best art is theft as well sometimes. So but people going, man, that is too good not to also do.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So between I do like the through line from Peeping Tom to this movie, and where we're seeing kind of what starts to set the foundation and expectations of future horror or future kind of slasher and thriller horror.
Yeah. Absolutely. I should mention, by the way, if you want to go hang out at Torchy's Bar. Well, Torchy's Bar is closed, but the facade, according to Google Maps right now, is still completely empty, so you could walk back and see the black the black area where the sign used to be. So it's 218th West 218th and a half West 5th Street in downtown Los Angeles. It was the same bar used in 48 Hours and Brewster's Millions and Naked Vengeance and a bunch of other movies. So this was
when you need a divey bar,
then
let's
there
go
it
to
was,
Torchy's, right?
right on
Like,
5th Street. So that it was quite convenient. It's too bad Torchy's no longer
which
around.
of course means that every bar, if you're living in a rural area, that's just every bar is Torchy's if you go to the city, right? Is your expectation as told by movies such as this.
I know.
The only difference is
Here we
some
have-
of their windows are in repair because people have been thrown out of them regularly, like every weekend, I think.
Oh
Here
my
we have
God.
Torchy's Tacos, which is
Yeah, exactly.
Isn't
That's
that
what I
funny?
thought first. Last, like, I was like, oh, Torchy's Tacos. I haven't been there in a while. That's what I thought when I saw this movie. But Torchy's Bar.
You know, that, by the way, that whole urban decay concept is fascinating to me because, like, I love the Kay Scarpetta novels, and they take place in Richmond, right? And when they begin in like the late 80s, early 90s, whatever it is, she's writing about a really rundown Richmond. And then by the time she was kind of done with the series, it was basically 20 years later,
Well,
and there's been all this rejuvenation. The city itself had changed, and it had to be changed in the books as well.
yeah, I mean, look, seriously, like Times Square got cleaned up. Like you can
Right.
go there as tourists. Like it's not what it was in the 70s. But but the idea was that everything was like that at some, like in the city.
Well, and
that
in
that was
rhetoric, it's still the case. People
yeah.
still talk about the city being that way. When try that in a small town only makes
geez.
sense as an anthem if you believe that cities are
Well,
places where people go to get
I
garbage at.
mean, even in Austin, like I encountered my fair share of just like stuff in Savannah that made me not as enamored with Savannah in the same way that you being a tourist there might be cool. What I dealt with was not super great. But I remember moving to Austin and have people say like, "Don't go to this, and this place," and being like, "Well, I won't." And then going
Right.
there, and every city has dangerous areas, right? Like, I mean, I'm not trying to say that everything's just safe and sunny and it's a magical unicorn land, but
Yeah.
Austin was different than other cities where like you can go, and if you go to the wrong place, you're definitely in the wrong place. Like,
Yeah.
this is a dangerous place to be, right?
Yeah, for real.
But then there's still, like I said, there's this other idea where all of the city is like that, and that's the media definitely was like, this is the me. This is
I still
everything's
think
me.
in a
I
lot
thought
of
that's fascinating.
in a lot of political rhetoric in this country, people present the city as being more dangerous than it is, for sure.
And
But
it can be like, don't like I said, don't get me wrong, but like
well, yeah,
the idea that it's just every bit is Mega City One.
right,
It's like, and the
right,
Mega City One's a direct reaction satire of that. Like, where do cities go if we extrapolate to the most degenerate ideals that a fascist cop would live in?
yeah,
A fascist police force, the only way that this can go. And that's what makes Dread so interesting. And I know this is a little off topic, but like,
right.
that's where you go in that. And that's why those stories are so brilliant, because again, you're not supposed to think that he's the ideal.
No. Yeah,
But
and
that
that's, by the
happens.
way,
But
I
anyway,
think
yeah,
where
yeah.
you lose a lot of listeners is not listeners to the show, but I guess viewers. You lose viewers to a movie because all of us can sort of grapple with the notion of an ugly downtown where Charles Durning needs to clean up the mean streets, Death Wish kind of stuff. To after a while, it becomes so comically absurd that only some people are interested. Judge Dredd's fascinating, but not as universally fascinating as Death Wish.
Right.
Where
Yeah.
you were still kind of in just an ugly version of our world.
Sure.
Anyway, okay, so this has been really, really cool, and we're gonna come back to the When a Stranger Calls cinematic universe and find out what happened later with and what's really funny is if we're disappointed in When a Stranger Calls back, now we live in a Hollywood universe where if somebody can pull the money together, you can do it yet again and just say, listen, just pretend that the second one didn't happen. So we will see whether it is one that deserves to be part of the continuity or not. I think it's hilarious that there's such a thing as continuity of When a Stranger Calls. So I can't wait for that conversation. Okay. let's get endorsements. So what's happening? Let's start with Julia. Julia, what do you have for us?
Well, in addition to, going to the theaters to watch Barbenheimer, which I loved both movies. We've been binge watching stuff, so I will start with Star Trek: Strange New Worlds because, of course, Carol Kane, and Carol Kane is in that show. The weird Carol Kane, like in Taxi, she's so weird. The second she starts talking, every time I start laughing hysterically just because of how she says things, and she's just really, really funny and just bizarre character. Very interesting old character. So that show's been great. They have some really interesting weird episodes. Like they had a crossover with the cartoon. What's the one with the kids? The Star Trek. What's it called?
Lower Decks, I think it's
Lower
called.
the Lower Decks. Yeah, it's not with kids, but it's the animated. That was really neat. They had a musical episode, and then this finale was very big budget. So really, really good. We've also super enjoyed. I really have been enjoying The After Party, which is a kind of a crime solving thing with Tiffany Haddish. Tiffany Haddish is great in it.
I second that.
Very funny and interesting. And then we just started watching Fisk, which is an Australian. Well, we watched all 6
We
episodes.
watched
are available
all
on
of it.
Netflix. On Netflix, yeah. Well, but I was gonna say because there's another season, but we don't have access to it yet. So, and then what was the other one? There was another thing that I was also super into. Oh, well, Hijack. I had talked about that. So yeah, I've just been really enjoying watching these streaming shows, and hopefully, these actors and writers get the actual money that they should be getting for these because they're great shows, and I would like to see them be well compensated.
Agreed.
Yeah, very much. Very much. Thank you. Drew, what do you have for us?
Well, with the death of William Friedkin, I've been on kind of an Exorcist kick. Aside from watching the film, I watched a feature-length conversation with him that was made in 2019 called Leap of Faith, William Friedkin on The Exorcist. It's on Shudder, and it was fascinating, hearing him tell his stories about the making of the movie. But aside from that, I've also, I decided to finally watch the TV show from 2016, which I had heard a lot of good things about, but I never actually got around to watching when it was actually on.
I don't know anything about that.
Yeah, there was an Exorcist TV show, and it's actually, at least what I've seen of it, pretty good. So and very boundary pushing for TV horror, considering that it was on a network. In much the same way that the Hannibal show was. So I haven't seen all of it, but what I have seen, I've been impressed with. So yeah, R.I.P. William Friedkin, for basically a creator of a whole genre of horror when you think about it.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Yeah, and I think it's a good time. I watched Exorcist 3. It's funny we talked about it so much this episode, but I literally watched it over the weekend. It's I feel like been a good time to revisit the franchise and revisit the roots of that, and as a way of honoring Friedkin, but also the legacy of The Exorcist. So that's what I've been up to.
That's wonderful. Thank you very, very much. Tony, what about you?
Yeah, I've been watching a bunch of stuff as well, and it's funny you mentioned Friedkin. I think one of the best draft house people who get it will get it, but one of the best draft house gimmicks was I don't know how many people have seen Killer Joe, but if you have seen Killer Joe, the draft house, I went in not knowing anything about it and ordered, they had a special that was fried chicken. And if you watch that movie, you might chuckle because luckily I ate fried chicken before. There's a scene in there that made sense. And I was like, oh, no. Oh, you magnificent bastards for including that on the menu. I also, if you're going to watch his films, I think revisiting Sorcerer is always a good, intense time. A good time is probably not the same as intense time, but just an amazing filmmaker, on so many levels. Definitely, will be sorely missed. I'm trying to think what else. I have a couple recommendations that we're going to split out. But I've also been watching the After Party. We've been catching up on Reservation Dogs, which is an amazing series. Just wow. By the way, Rain watched all of Fisk. Like she binged it all.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I watched some episodes, but she was like full on watching it.
It's such a funny show.
It was great. Yeah. There's a lot of good stuff from Australia that we're getting lately. We watched Family Law from Australia. That's also really good. I'm trying to think of what else. I mean, I've been.
We both saw Mutant Mayhem.
Yeah. Drew and I watched Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and it was great. Just amazing art direction, like hands down. And working in an animation studio, working as an animator, and then being on a different side, working just in an animation studio in tech. Like the amount of work that it takes, and kind of wherewithal to commit to a style like the Ninja Turtles movie is its own just really beautiful thing. And I like that with this and like Spider-Verse and a few other movies, we're getting these original looking things that allow, like, this is what you can do with computer animation. This is what you can do with a combo of 2D and 3D together working in tandem that really breaks the mold from a more traditional 3D kind of look and feel.
Yeah, no kidding.
And I want to see more of that. Like, let's use that medium. It's like why I get disappointed in some comic book movies. Like, they're almost afraid to be comic books. Whereas something like Spider-Verse feels like there's panel, there's comic, like it's about being a comic book. And I think that, we've gotten so wrapped up in being...
That's something that Spider-Verse did well, but everything else has, not since Ang Lee's Hulk, really have people
and I'm not saying everything has to be that way, but I do really enjoy when people will take that extra leap to add back in the things that made it. Because Ninja Turtles, I like the comics, and I was just a little bit too old to really enjoy the show because I kind of wanted the grittiness of the comics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which came from liking Daredevil, right? I mean, that's
right.
where it came from. There's some really nice Easter eggs and nods. I think it is, to me, this is the short of maybe the first movie, which is its own kind of weird thing. I think this is the best kind of hybrid of comic feel and cartoon, like the original kind of series. Like, it feels good. Great voice acting across the board. That was really great. I've been catching up on some kung fu movies, and again, watching gritty stuff like Exterminator and just kind of random stuff that shows up on Amazon's back to just showing me like weirdness. So I want to get back more into that. I'm sure that I've watched a ton of stuff. I mean, but I'll be honest, a lot of my nights were spent trying to make notes and get the mixes done for this next Deserts of Mars album. That's been my other focus. Now I need to focus on artwork and stuff on that. But yeah, I'm sure there's stuff I've missed, but there's, like I said, there's also stuff I want to break out and talk about that you and I have talked about. Awesome. And leading up to Fantastic Fest is my other thing. Is I'm really stoked. I think it's the 21st of September, so we're not too far off from that. So I'm super excited. I'm super excited to talk about that again. I'll be out for that week, but I love doing reports, and I'm hoping to tell our listeners what's going on there. This again, I don't know what the strike will do to promotion and or what comes into the fest, which is going to be, luckily it's a genre fest from all over the world, so we'll see. I'd love it if it'd be awesome. I don't know if any listeners are coming to Fantastic Fest, but if so, like, let's hang out, because I think it's a great time. It's my staycation every year.
Yeah. By the way, the latest bet that people are laying is that there's a really good chance that the strike could be resolved around Labor Day. It's a sort of artificial but nevertheless compelling deadline that people are kind of setting for themselves. And with the producers and the Writers Guild sitting back down again as of this past Friday, having had an early meeting the previous Friday, they had another meeting this Friday. The word coming out is sufficiently like non-committal that it sounds like they're making progress, if that makes any sense. In other words, it was like, okay, we're hearing some proposals. We're not going to be talking about every detail, so hang tight. That means progress. So
right.
I think it's very possible we'll see it get done in the next 3
Yeah,
weeks. I think. So.
friends of mine in the industry is one of those. Well, they've kind of strung us along. Yeah, this could be good, but they've strung us along before, so
Absolutely.
I don't know if I believe it yet, but let's keep talking. Is the feel I've
It's the
gotten
only
from
way it
people
can be. I mean,
from people I know who are closer in it, in the mix, I guess.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, the whole purpose is to get back to negotiating. So,
Mhm.
that's so you have to be skeptical, and you have to also just sit down and negotiate. So we're gonna see what happens. Okay. That brings us to the end. So everybody, thank you very, very much. We cannot wait to be back for When a Stranger Calls Back. And if you have any comments or questions that you want us to think about in talking about that, come to the Facebook page and let us know. So good night, everybody, and thank you.
Bye.